The desk was a chaos of scattered papers and office supplies, smothering every inch of its surface. Reorganizing it was my first task that morning, but a movement outside the window caught my eye. I saw him immediately, Kenny, storming across the yard. His faded jeans and plaid shirt were smeared with oil stains, and his crusted lips moved up and down, muttering to himself. As he drew nearer, I sat down and waited. He reached the wooden steps of my trailer office, and I cleared a small space on my desk to lean forward. He didn't knock. Strike one against him, I thought, but what did he have against me? The door creaked open, and Kenny stood there, his John Deere cap in hand. "We got another problem, boss," he said, with a calculated pause before boss. "Strike two." "What is it today, Kenny?" I asked, feigning disinterest. I picked up a loose piece of paper, pretending to inspect it. "Your auto part's supposed to be going down to Patterson, won't be there this afternoon." "Reed didn't show up," he said, a hint of triumph in his voice. Reed, properly known as Charlie Redmond, had been the most reliable trucker in the yard since my dad ran the place. But today, he was missing. Kenny's tone was almost gleeful. "He was supposed to have the truck on the road 2 hours ago," Kenny continued. I sighed, leaning back. There wasn't much I could say. "Sit down, Kenny," I ordered, gesturing to the chair opposite me. He hesitated, but then took the seat, dirt falling from his tattered work boots with every step. "In all your years working with Reed, how often has he been late or not shown up?" I asked. Kenny pressed his cap over his knee. "Never like this. He just changed after that week off down at his camp. Went hunting around Lake Champlain, came back different. The guy said he had a big fight with Donna, his wife. Maybe the storms they had there got to him. When he came back, he was muttering to himself, saying bad things about you and your pops. Then he's late, and now he doesn't show." I looked out the window at the loaded trailer, meant to be on its way to New Jersey. This was going to cost me, but I had to handle it delicately. "So he's acting strange," I said. "Can't say that's the first time we've seen that from one of our guys, right?" Kenny nodded. "I suppose so. And the other guys occasionally show up late or miss delivery times. We let it slide, right?" Another reluctant nod. "I suppose so." "Then we can't just fire Reed for 2 mistakes in all these years," I said. The unease growing. Something was off, more than just a missed delivery. Kenny's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place, a hint of fear maybe. The storm outside was just beginning. He thought I was taking control, and he didn't like that. "Then what the hell do you want me to do? I can't get my job done if the drivers aren't showing up. Do you know where he lives?" "Yeah," Kenny muttered. "You're gonna take me there." Red's house was as typical as you could find in the townships. A 1-story bungalow with gray paneling and a driveway wide enough for 3 cars. The property was vast, stretching from the street to the lush forest, with neighbors so distant they'd have to yell to greet each other over Sunday papers. Kenny pulled his Silverado into the spot next to Red's. As I stepped out, I noticed Red's truck was considerably newer and in better shape. I wondered if Kenny secretly resented him for that ... When I reached the front porch, I realized I was walking alone. Turning back, I saw Kenny still in the driver's seat, head buried in his hands over the wheel. I whistled sharply at him to come join me. For the second time that day, Kenny reluctantly did as I told him. I knocked gently, standing behind the frosted glass window of the door, trying to appear patient. After about 25 seconds without a response, Kenny pressed his finger to the doorbell and held it there. "That ought to get him out here," he said, finally releasing it. But he was wrong. We waited in silence. I tested the door. It was slightly ajar and pushed open easily. Nothing unusual for this area. But the inside of the house was a stark contrast to its calm exterior. The kitchen was filthy, floors and countertops littered with wrappers, beer and soda cans, pizza boxes, and other junk food packaging. Drawers and cabinets were pulled out and hanging open, as if a tornado had passed through. Red, I called out, my voice dying in the quiet. I stepped forward into the kitchen, Kenny close behind. I jumped when I saw him. From the kitchen, you could see into the living room at the rear of the house, overlooking the backyard and forest. Red sat on a beaten leather couch against the near wall, cross-legged and staring straight ahead. The TV was on, but his gaze was fixed beyond it, through the big bay window and into the trees. He didn't blink. Kenny held his breath behind me. Red didn't acknowledge our presence at all. I glanced around. The living room wasn't as bad as the kitchen, but clearly hadn't been cleaned in some time. Red looked different than the last time I'd seen him. His long gray hair, usually surrounding a bald patch, was now gone. The white t-shirt he wore was tucked into his track pants and pressed tightly against his chest and stomach. "Hello, Red," I finally said. "Derek," he answered, still staring out the window. "Take a seat. You're the boss now, aren't you?" "Yes, and that's why I'm here to talk to you." I took the closest seat, an old wooden rocking chair. Kenny didn't move from his spot in the kitchen. "Red," I said, rocking the chair back. "You know you had a delivery to make today, right?" "Yes, 10 a.m. to Donna Patterson." "Then why didn't you show up?" "I couldn't." "What do you mean you couldn't?" "Too many deer in the woods right now. They'll start eating away at Donna's garden if I don't keep an eye out." I looked down at his left hand. The white studded wedding band he always wore was missing. I considered asking more about Donna, but thought better of it. At least I understood his problem now, or so I thought. Through the corner of my eye, I saw Kenny, arms crossed and swaying impatiently in the kitchen. I needed to wrap things up before he intervened. "Red, I appreciate all the great work you've done for my father and me over the years. It's hard to have this discussion with you." "I know," he said. "I'll let it go this one time. I'll call the guys down in Jersey and tell them we had a mechanical issue, but I don't like to make lying a habit. Tomorrow, I need you to guarantee you'll be there on time and ready to take the load down. 10 a.m. same time as today. I can only make the delivery if the trailer is actually there." "I don't think it will be," he replied, almost to himself. That made me chuckle, but it was an uneasy laugh. The storm brewing inside Red's mind was far from over, and I could feel its chill seeping into me. I got up and tapped him on the shoulder as I made my way back to the kitchen, gently pushing Kenny toward the front door. "All right then, I'll see you tomorrow, Red." Kenny and I made our way out and back to his truck. "Did I handle that as well as my dad used to?" I asked as I strapped in. Kenny didn't answer. He pulled into reverse and looked over his shoulder. I could always tell immediately when there was a problem in the yard. And a problem was exactly what I saw the next day as I pulled my car in around 12:30 p.m. Kenny and a few of the other truckers were huddled in a circle in front of one of the loading doors, talking animatedly. Kenny was waving his arms wildly, the others listening, shrugging their shoulders and scratching their heads. I parked in my usual spot next to the stairs of my trailer office. But instead of darting inside before getting noticed, as I usually tried to do, I walked over to them. Whatever problem they were having was going to be mine eventually, so I might as well get it over with right away. "Let me guess," I said as I almost reached their circle. "Red didn't show up this morning." Kenny stepped out in front of the others, his clipboard hanging loosely by his side. "Well, there's that, but we've got other problems too." "And what would those be, Kenny?" I asked, feeling the first stirrings of irritation. "I was mad that Red didn't show up this morning," Kenny said. "So before I tried to figure that out, I thought I'd help you out by covering the route for him. But when I checked, I realized lane 6 was empty. And what's special about lane 6? I asked, the irritation growing. "That's where the trailer Red was supposed to deliver was parked," he replied. "And where is it now?" "No idea. It's just gone. Disappeared off the lot." My blood started to boil. I pushed a long breath out through tight lips. The others avoided eye contact, staring at the ground or up into the air. I turned back to Kenny and stared hard at him. "Did you forget to lock up last night?" Nope. Locked it up just like I've done for the last 20 years. So you're telling me you locked up, but somehow a giant 18-wheeler trailer that was parked in the lot isn't there anymore. That's not possible, Kenny. I'm telling you the truth. The gate was still locked when I showed up this morning. No tire marks in the dirt where it might have gone. Whoever took it must have known what they were doing. Does Red or anyone else have a key to the gate? Nope. Could the lock have been picked? I suppose so. But whoever did it really covered their tracks. The problem had escalated into something bigger than I'd ever dealt with before. Here I was, in front of a group of men almost twice my age, and I had no idea what to do. I needed to say something before Kenny brought up that I still hadn't fixed the security cameras. I settled for the first thing that came to mind. Kenny, Jackson, and Stan, come with me. The rest of you get to work on whatever you're supposed to be doing. I started back to my office. What are we doing, Derek? Kenny called from behind, still testing how far he could push. Exactly what I say we're gonna do. Now hurry the hell up. I pushed the chair away from my desk, letting my palms rest on the part I'd cleared the previous day. I stood there for a moment while the three men watched from the other side. I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess that Red doesn't have a cell phone, I said finally. Does anyone have his home phone number? I know it, Jackson answered. I gestured towards the phone on my desk. He swung it around in my direction, pushing a few scattered papers to the floor as he did. He dialed the number and then passed the receiver to me. I paused before taking it. My hand shook as I brought it to my ear. Derek, Red's voice sighed from the other end of the line. He picked up before it even rang, as if he knew the exact moment I was going to call. Red, why didn't you show up this morning? I thought I made things very clear yesterday. I told you I wasn't gonna come if there wasn't a trailer for me to deliver. Interesting that you know what's missing without even showing up. Do you know where it is now, by any chance? No. Do you know who's responsible for taking it? Yep. I slammed my fist down on the desk. The three men on the other side took a nervous step back together. What did you do, Red? Tell me. He didn't answer. Only his breathing sounded on the other end. I'm talking to you, I said, trying to steady my voice. The silence stretched on, thick and oppressive, as if the very air was holding its breath, waiting for Red's next move. I don't like these trees providing too much cover for the deer. I reckon they'd be better off dead anyway. Red's voice crackled through the receiver. Stop wasting time. Where's the trailer? I don't know, boss. I slammed the phone down. It slid off the desk, knocking more papers to the floor. Jackson, Stan, drive over to Red's house now. Make sure that son of a bitch doesn't go anywhere. I turned to Kenny. And you, here's what you're going to do. Go outside and inspect every leaf, blade of grass, pebble, and clump of dirt until you figure out exactly how that trailer disappeared last night. Sure thing, boss, Kenny said as he started towards the door. And what will you be up to in the meantime? I didn't answer him. I was already dialing the police. Kenny's truck engine made the worst clicking sound every time he turned, a noise that gnawed at my sanity as we retraced the exact route we had taken the day before. It was time to take matters into my own hands. I didn't have enough evidence to spur the police into action. I spent half an hour on the phone arguing, but finally, they agreed to send a trooper out to Red's place when they got the chance. I knew how long that would take. Kenny turned the truck around the last bend, and Red's house loomed ahead. I trembled at the thought of the upcoming confrontation. You ever seen anything like this before? I asked Kenny. Nope. Never seen a trailer just disappear in all my years working this job. And you're sure you didn't just forget to lock it up last night? Just like you're sure there's no signs of forced entry? Kenny looked away instead of replying. My anger flared and I turned towards him, ready to scream. But I stopped as soon as I saw his face. The color had drained from his wrinkled, rough skin. He stared wide-eyed ahead of us as the truck slowed. I looked through the front window and saw what he was looking at. Pins and needles rose in my chest. The area behind Red's house became clearer the closer we got. The forest that had once grown thick and green had changed. The trees were no longer lush and full of life. They were completely bare, as if it were still the dead of winter. Kenny's hands trembled on the wheel as we parked behind Jackson's Jeep. Something about the place felt inherently unsafe. Red was nowhere to be seen, and neither were Jackson and Stan. The Jeep was empty. We sat in silence for a full minute before I finally moved. I pushed the door open and stepped down to the road. I heard a click behind me as I took a nervous step into Red's lawn. Like the day before, Kenny remained in the driver's seat, the key still in the ignition. He grasped the dull leather hatchet I noticed earlier on the truck floor, his pinky finger twitching along the splintered wooden handle. There would be no convincing him to get out with me a second time. I felt around my pockets and was relieved to discover one of the yard's X-Acto knives in the back left. I wondered if I could find the guts to use it if I needed to. Perhaps Jackson and Stan were simply inside the house, waiting patiently alongside Red as I had instructed. I could force myself to believe that. What I couldn't bring myself to believe was any rational explanation for what had happened to the trees. I had seen them alive and healthy just the day before. Red had said he wanted them dead on the phone, but there was no way that could have been the work of one man. The front door was open, staring back at me like a void in the darkness. I knew it was foolish to go inside, but then, from the corner of my eye, I saw Red not inside the house, but amidst the dead trees behind it. He was out in broad daylight, unarmed. He walked towards the yard, his arms at his sides. Little twigs cracked beneath his steps as he emerged from the forest. I felt his gaze piercing into me like a laser. Trying to appear casual, I took a step back toward the truck, but I didn't turn away. It felt unsafe to turn my back on him. When he reached the edge of the grass, he turned away and started walking toward the work shed at the far corner of the property. I eased as he disappeared inside and glanced back at Kenny, who still hadn't moved. He stared at me, petrified, clutching the axe with trembling hands. I was faced with a decision. I could cowardly retreat to the truck, no bigger of a man than Kenny, afraid of an unarmed, feeble old man. Or I could go forward like Red had gestured, as if accepting a childish dare to prove who was in charge. The grass crunched beneath my feet with every step. My breath was long and steady, attempting to keep my heart rate under control. I braced myself as I reached the entrance to the shed, my hand gripping the doorframe, ready to push off and give myself a head start just in case Red, more than twice my age, started to chase me. The shed's interior was covered in dust and wood shavings, spider webs occupying the corners of the ceiling. Red kept his back to me, fiddling with a few rusty tools at his workbench. He whistled casually, as if he didn't notice or even care that I stood behind him. I wondered exactly what I was going to say. On the surface, it was no different than when I had shown up the day before. But before I could figure something out, he broke the silence. "Derek," he said, "so nice of you to stop by. Hello, Red." He turned to a toolbox by his side, taking more than half a step in my direction. It was enough to make me tense up again. "Tell me, boss, how's that old bastard of a father of yours doing? You mean the guy who employed you for your entire life?" "He's fine. Employed and enslaved me, the way I see it. Anyway, I know that old ticker of his doesn't beep like it used to. I'll make sure it gives out on him." I scanned the shed, looking for something big enough he could use as a weapon to threaten me with. There was nothing I could find. I reached back and felt for the knife in my pocket. "Red, I don't want any trouble from you. I don't even care if you show up anymore, but you have to tell me what happened to that trailer. I told you, I know it's gone, but I don't know where it is. It doesn't make any sense. How can you know about a massive trailer disappearing and not have any clue where? I don't know where things go after I make them disappear. I'm sure they go someplace, but not someplace like where you and I are living now. What the hell happened to you while you were at that lake? Did you get caught out in the storms? Everyone's been saying you've lost your mind. That question made Red stop fumbling with his tools. Slowly, he pivoted and looked in my direction. An unhinged expression was on his face, like he found it both hilarious and insulting that I questioned his sanity. "It's funny you should ask that," he said, taking a step forward. "The two chumps you sent over asked the same thing. It didn't turn out so well for them. And please, don't even try grabbing for that knife in your back pocket. It won't do you any good." "Red, where are they? Where's Donna? Why don't I see your wife around?" "I don't know exactly where Donna is. Cheating is probably the same place your trailer is now. I also know where all the leaves from the trees went when I didn't want them anymore." I started to backpedal carefully, making sure to keep my balance and not turn my back on Red. "And my two friends?" I asked. "They're just hanging out in the woods. I'm sure you can see them if you looked." He faked a lunge forward and laughed as I stumbled back and fell. "You want to join them? I'd be happy to help you. It'll serve you right for all this you and your dad put me through." "Red, please. What have I ever done to you?" "Don't call me Red anymore. I don't like that name. That's what people used to call me." "Don't call me Red," he said again, getting closer. "The sky is red now." I collected myself as quickly as I could and sprang back to my feet. From the corner of my eye, I noticed two limp figures hanging impossibly high in the barren treetops. Their lifeless bodies swayed gently, grazing against the branches. I started a full-on sprint, terrified that the old man would somehow be right behind me, that his feeble legs could pump faster than my own. The light above changed to a darker shade I'd never seen before. "Start the truck." I yelled at Kenny as I ran toward him, but Kenny was too preoccupied to listen. He had vacated his spot in the driver's seat and stood outside the truck, neck craned back, eyes fixed on the sky. The color above kept shifting, hues I had never seen before. I jumped into the truck and locked the door, screaming at Kenny, who remained in a trance, staring at the spectacle above. "Kenny, let's go." Finally, he snapped out of it and got inside. As the engine roared to life, I chanced to look back at the lawn. Red had stopped just outside the shed. He stood there, calmly staring back at us, his head following me until we were completely out of sight. Kenny floored the gas pedal, not stopping at any signs or streetlights. We blazed down one of the long country roads until the gas gauge dipped into the red and the car started to beep at us. Only then did Kenny slow down. He looked at the dash and pulled us over. We had put many kilometers between us and Red's property at that point, yet somehow I couldn't help but check over my shoulder, expecting to see him strolling casually down the street behind us. Finally, the panic started to fade. As it did, I realized something. The sky, which had gone completely red as we peeled away, had changed. In the heat of our escape, we hadn't noticed it return to the natural pale blue it had been before. Nobody ever saw Red again, nor could anyone explain how Stan and Jackson were hung so high up in those empty trees in such a short period of time. A few neighbors reported the same rose color in the sky that we saw, but what could they do? I guess they just chalked it up as some kind of natural wonder. Last week was my father's funeral. Nearly all current and previous employees from the yard, except for Red, of course attended. He died suddenly the day after we frantically fled Red's property. He'd had a heart attack. Estimates from the coroner said it happened in the early afternoon, likely right around the time Red had threatened me that his heart would stop.